Hello from the World Economic Forum in Geneva, Switzerland. I'm Adrian Monk and welcome to Agenda Dialogues. We'll be hearing from leaders from across the world on how to build a just and equitable society post-COVID. And as many of us think about our holiday plans, we'll be looking too at how to rebuild travel and tourism. Our guest today, Nobel laureate and former President of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. From India, Smriti Irani, currently serving in PM Modi's cabinet as Minister of Women and Child Development. Ebru Özdemir chairs Turkey's Limak Holding. Peter Kern is CEO of online travel company Expedia. From Kuwait, we have Hassan Al-Huri, CEO of National Aviation Services, and also from India, Ajay Singh, Chairman of SpiceJet. Now I'll hand over to our chair of our discussion, President of the World Economic Forum, Birger Brender.
Good afternoon from Geneva. Thank you for joining us. We have an extremely strong panel today, as you just heard from my colleague, Adrian Monk. And we're really discussing the fallouts of this pandemic and how to make sure that the recovery is inclusive. This is a big challenge because we know that there's still a lot of people in the world that are not vaccinated, and we know that there are new strains and variants out there, so we can only be safe when everyone are safe. We also know that the recovery is on its way, but the 15 trillion US dollars that are used in stimulus, only 1% of them have been used in developing countries. Let me start with the largest democracy in the world and second most populous country in the world, India. India did well at the beginning of this pandemic, but has had also challenges lately. I think there is no light in the end of the tunnel, but of course we know that also the cabinet and Prime Minister Modi is of course concerned about what it will mean when it comes to inequalities and also opportunities for the poorer part of the population. And we're so happy that Minister Irani, that you were able to join us. Thank you for your leadership. And also, maybe you can share with us faced with the challenges, how will you make sure that the recovery will be inclusive, and how do you see the situation in India today? Over to you.
Good evening, Birger, from the National Capital of India, Delhi. You spoke in your opening remarks about the light at the end of the tunnel. Talking of lights, as of this moment, as we speak, India today has administered vaccines, close to 297 million doses, which tells you that rapidly we are reaching out to every eligible Indian over the age of 18, a vaccine provided free by the government of India so that we have our entire population protected. This pandemic has been a challenge for democracies across the world. We in India, when we talk about inequality, leverage technology right from the beginning of the office of Prime Minister Modi in 2014, recognizing that a democracy as large as ours, a demography as diverse as ours, will need the support from technology to ensure that those gaps are bridged. And that is why when the pandemic hit my country, we saw that over 200 million women who had access to a bank account for the first time in their lives had a transfer of over 300 billion rupees as economic empowerment transfer for women, especially in India due to the pandemic. We had 80 million women who received clean cooking fuel from the government because the government recognized that this support needs to continue, especially in the times where there was lockdown in the country. We had an announcement much before the pandemic hit the world called Ayushman Bharat Yojana, which Mr. Singh is on board today in this dialogue, recognizes that over 100 million families now are medically protected and covered for over 2,000 illnesses across all government hospitals in our country. Today, as we speak, every district in our country has a dedicated COVID hospital. As we speak today, I can also proudly say today in the cabinet, the Prime Minister announced yet again free ration for over 800 million Indians. And I must here add that sustained campaign of ensuring free food for 800 million Indians for 15 months, we allocated over 2 trillion rupees so that nobody in India sleeps on an empty stomach. But the challenges, as you say, continue because the virus mutates. The challenge is to build back better and build back equally. And that is why the government, when the first wave came, announced an economic package which was valued at around 10% of our GDP. You also, in your opening remarks, spoke about the women and child development. And I'm happy to share with you that when it comes to food security, apart from the government announcement of food support to every Indian, we also had doorstep delivery of food and medicines to the house of every pregnant, lactating mother in our country and every child in our country. Recognizing that not only economically, not only medically, but also socially, we need to ensure that families stay together, women and children stay protected. We have had our helpline, police services, and one-stop crisis service centers working 24/7. In a democracy as large as ours, given the impact of the pandemic, we recognize that there were Indians who were working across the world. You will speak of travel and tourism today on this panel. I will here highlight, and again, Mr. Singh has borne witness to the fact that India got back 9.2 million of our citizens from across the world so that they could come back to their loved ones when the world was locking down. So the challenges, yes, globally are aplenty, but we in India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, are ensuring that every need of the citizen is met, every challenge is met with solutions. And one of the solutions that we had, which was launched immediately after the pandemic hit my country, was a digital application which helped in tracing of the virus across our country. The Arogya Setu app, as it's popularly known today, also allows for vaccine registrations. So we've had digital solutions given in this pandemic to citizens across various verticals of challenges that have been faced. But we are committed to building back better and building back equally.
No, thank you so much for that overview. And I think we also were expecting quite substantial growth in India this year. We were expecting two-digit growth and would be the fastest growing economy of the larger economies in the world. I think maybe you're revising the numbers now, but how do you see the outlook for the rest of the year now when you are so in a major way stepping up the vaccination?
I, apart from the Ministry of Women and Child Development, have had the privilege of serving as Minister of Textiles in my country. And how innovative can Indians get when it comes to their own manufacturing potential? I saw it firsthand when we in India, who had never had one manufacturing unit of PPE suits, managed to turn around and start 1,100 companies, give employment to over 500,000 people, 70% of them women, during the lockdown. And in 3 months, we became the second largest exporter of PPE suits across the world and second largest exporters of N95 masks across the world. Now, this happened because the industry and government partnered in reorienting our manufacturing capacities. We had Indians stepping up, irrespective of the challenges, to say, tell us how can we help. Ajay Singh is on the panel this evening. He's had to turn around his flights as rescue operation flights. So every Indian has stepped up. And that is why when you talk about financially, how do we look at resurrecting from the pandemic? I must here add that when the government talks about food security, recognizing the challenges of lockdowns globally, not only domestically, we have ensured that we give birth to new industry verticals, manufacturing verticals. Apart from PPE, India is also now poised to become the pharmacy of the world. We have supported over 95 countries by supply of vaccine. You know of over 100 countries that receive support in hydroxychloroquine from India. And that is our commitment, that we grow strong, we grow back better, not only for India, but for the rest of the world as well.
No, thank you so much, Minister. I think, Adrian, I would like to then move over to you. I think we're still waiting for President Sirleaf Johnson to join us. So we'll come back to the President, but we have a great group here to follow up on what the Minister just said. And several of them have also pivoted during the crisis, their business model.
We certainly do, Burger. And while we're trying to get a connection into Monrovia in Liberia, it's a great opportunity to bring in our other panelists. And I want to start with Ebru Ozdemir, because Ebru, your company, Limac Holdings, you work across an incredible array of different sectors, but you've been involved in building hospitals, you've been involved in building airports. How has Limac Holdings been affected by the crisis? What's been just give us a sense of a conglomerate like yours. What's been the impact of COVID on your business?
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, it was a crazy 1.5 years because we're active in 15 different countries with more than 50,000 employees. So basically, we try to cope with the uninterrupted work. Unfortunately, some of the airports were closed. However, it's coming back now. And the hotels were closed, but we reopened them. And we had some issues in the supply chains because we have to send a lot of equipment to all these different countries. But we survived, and now the vaccinations are really moving forward. We are really more optimistic about the future.
And where specifically do you see the most progress happening when you look at your business and the sectors you're involved in, the countries you're involved in? Where is bouncing back fastest?
We see the tourism, it's bouncing back very fast. Because what we have done is in Turkey, the vaccinations were completed. We have 7 hotels in Turkey. We have 1 hotel in North Macedonia and 1 hotel in Northern Cyprus. So the government has given a priority for the vaccinations. And now we're opening up by July 1st. And suddenly the announcement came from Russia, 50 flights will land in Antalya in 1 day. So the hotels are now going from an empty hotels to the, we'll have shortage in the rooms, in the supply. A lot of Europeans want to come as well. And of course, these are coming by all of these are coming through the airports. So we see a huge demand in the airports as well. And as we operate in the rules of the pandemic, we are trying to create better solutions for everyone using all these hygienic factors as well. We created safe certificates in the hotels and also in the airports. The same is valid for example, Senegal, because there's a huge diaspora who couldn't travel for the past 1.5 years, and they want to come back to the country. Same valid in Pristina, the Eastern Europe as well. So the airports and the hotels, we see a huge comeback right now, but in the pleasure travel.
I want to bring in, on that note, Peter Kern. Peter, Expedia has an incredible array of offerings across the whole travel experience sector. How are you seeing the travel sector as we look at the summer? Is it a massive pent-up demand poised to come roaring back, or is it a less strong kind of return to people getting into the vacation experience? Oh, just need to unmute you, I think, there, Peter.
Apologies. Zoom always gets me. I was just saying, I believe there's massive pent-up demand. We're seeing it across the globe, but it is hemmed in by whatever the restrictions are for a given country. So if you think about what Ebru was just discussing, when you have a channel that can open between Russia and Turkey, we see terrific demand. But there are many countries around the globe where really you can't travel outside the country. And in some cases, it's quite restrictive still, even within the country. So what we've seen, as she alluded to, is lots of demand for leisure travel, for domestic travel first. And then as borders open up and corridors open up, essentially, you see travel pick up. So you've seen it pick up in Europe recently. We've seen it's been quite strong in the US, where it's picked up and where there are corridors to places like Mexico and starting this summer, the Caribbean. So you're starting to see that, but obviously it's still going to be restricted by what governments are willing to do. The UK is, moving backwards. Other countries have moved forwards. Then back, Japan was much better, and now it's worse. That's happening all over the globe. So vaccines clearly, are the answer. We'd like everyone to be vaccinated. We'd like to get back to, more normal travel patterns. But it's clear that there's, huge pent-up demand across the globe for people to move around.
And what are the trends you're seeing? We hear a lot about people exploring their own countries because of the travel restrictions, people staying home to have vacations, or at least staying in their home countries. What have you been seeing from the huge amount of data that you sit on about what's happening in the travel sector?
Yeah, I've said all along, it's pretty much what you'd expect. I mean, it is a tale of 1,000 stories of different countries and different places, but people are taking the opportunity to explore domestically. Certainly the kinds of leisure travel like beaches, lakes, mountains, things like that are most popular. Big cities have been less popular, largely because there's not that much open in big cities. Even in the US, while big cities are starting to pick up, like New York and San Francisco, places like that, they're trailing dramatically behind places like Miami, where there's a beach to go to, or the Florida coast, et cetera. So, and you see that in every country. The UK is going to the coast for the summer, right? And everybody is looking for those leisure destinations where they can take their families. We have seen during the pandemic, though it is reversing a little bit, more interest in vacation rental homes as opposed to what we call conventional lodging, hotels, et cetera. But that trend is reversing somewhat now, as we see, not so much that vacation rentals are not strong, but conventional lodging, hotels are now picking up, and big cities are picking up as they become safer and more things, restaurants, tourist attractions open up.
Thanks, Peter. I just want to hand back to Birger for a minute, because I think we've got our line to Monrovia open, and we've got Ellen Sirleaf-Johnson with us. Welcome, President Johnson. Birger, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. So good to see you, Madam President. We are so pleased that you could join us, and thank you for your leadership also on the commission that you have headed together with former Prime Minister Helen Clark on behalf of the WHO, looking at how did we cope with the COVID and what could we learn for the future. We're still seeing major challenges out there. We know a lot of people are still waiting to be vaccinated. We know that a lot of the stimulus has been allocated into the developed world and not the developing world. And we know that people will be joining the group of people living in extreme poverty as a result of the COVID. So what do you think we should do and what do you expect the world leaders to deliver now in a G20 and G7 and the UN context moving forward? Welcome.
Thank you, and sorry for joining late. And I'm glad you started with the concern about the virus, the pandemic that really has overwhelmed an unprepared world, has left untold cost in human lives, in livelihoods, economic growth, and at the same time comes at a time when we're all in the arena of the exposure of global inequities, injustices, deep-rooted racism. Our commission have pointed to the fact that today the variant is still active, is still raging, and I don't think we all yet know the consequences of what this will be, or for that matter, whether the current responses will be effective enough to contain it. As you pointed out, the co-chair of the independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response has pointed out that there are two overarching action that needs to be taken globally. One is to reset the entire global institutional architecture. And secondly, of course, to reform the World Health Organization to make it more effective to carry out its mandate. Whatever we do, whether it's creating, as we propose, a Global Health Threats Council or International Finance Facility, or a global platform for the delivery of public goods such as vaccines, we come to the fact that today, if we do not stop the virus, all human lives are at risk. And the first step of vaccines, you mentioned that. But it's unacceptable that rich nations of the world who have the resources to be able to procure the vaccines from a few manufacturing companies based in the North. We have what we call vaccine nationalism, that they can continue to say they can vaccinate 100% of their population and leave the others unattended. In Africa, for example, 2% of our population is what we now target. But today, the global situation is even dire, even for those that have the capacity for vaccine. Only 10% of the population, the global population, according to today's record, has been vaccinated. So we can see how important it is that we address this. And I mean, we give recognition to a lot of response that's coming, whether it's from the United States President Biden, whether it's from the European Union, those who have pledged 1 billion doses for delivery by 2021, or 2 billion, or at 2 billion by 2022. We still know that even if we do that, we need 7 billion to get even 40% of the global population vaccinated for safety. Now, on to the question that you raised about social reinvigoration, being able to address social issues. Clearly, today's world would speak to that. The world has to address those inequities that have left women behind, not able to be empowered to compete, to take a rightful place in leadership position, particularly at high levels. To many of the youths, if we look at the young population, particularly in Africa, young population, many of them getting educated, technically prepared, but a lack of available jobs for them. Those are the social inequities that we all need to find the responses to. And some of those answers lies in investment in the areas that make a difference. You cannot get jobs for the poor unless you create those businesses the investment in private sector, the access to private capital that enable young entrepreneurs to be able to participate in the value chain, the trade chain. And that takes a lot of commitment on the part of those countries. It's so easy to invest where the returns are higher, where the security makes it easier. But there you don't touch where the real social inequities are, unless one is able to change that mentality, to be able to accept risk, to be able to see the support of equity extended to all these young technical people that have creativity and ingenuity, trying their best to get knowledge, trying to access digitization to make them more competitive. What can one do to be able to respond to those needs? I grant you that responsibility lies first with leadership. I mean, leadership of every nation, whether it's the leadership of poor nations. Clearly, the primary responsibility rests on their shoulders in the formulation of policies, in ensuring full participation by all of those. But it's also a responsibility of global leadership and the type of multilateralism that we have seen in the past that have brought through collective and coordinated action to be able to address poverty, to be able to promote those activities that will lead us to the achievement of the sustainable development goals. One has seen a pullback from that into nationalism, protectionism, isolationism. So the challenge is going to lie to every one of us, from whatever institutions we are in, wherever we work from. That challenge to be able to find a way forward. I hope that as your discussions go on, I'll stay for a little while.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for allowing me to make a few comments. I hope it resonates with some of you, and I hope that in some of your remarks and as you go into reflection yourselves when you leave this meeting, that it stay with you and you'll help us to find all the answers to meet these challenges.
Thank you so much, Ellen Johnson-Sirleaf, for your leadership and also for this food for thought. I think this is also for Adrian a great segue into the next segment for you, the President's real perspective on what it will take to achieve a more inclusive and fair world.
Thanks very much, Birger, and thanks, Madam President, for that very thoughtful contribution. I think as we look at the global economy, we're talking about a decline in the global travel and tourism sector of nearly 4 trillion euros, which is an incredible hit to the global economy. And part of recovery is not just obviously vaccination, as the President pointed out, getting people moving again. And one company that is doing that or helping to do that in many, many different markets is National Aviation Services, which is headquartered in Kuwait. Delighted to have Hassan El-Houri with us on the line. Hassan, we're seeing an incredible range of different measures being put in place to control travel, to control the epidemic, but also quite a confusing number of regulations. How, as someone like you who operate airports around the world, how are you and your staff dealing with that confusion? How are you navigating through it?
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you to the WEF as well for having me on this wonderful panel. To answer that question, I want to go back to the 1950s. The reason the 1950s is important for aviation is because it was during that time when English was adopted as the official language of travel, of aviation, of airlines, pilots, air traffic control, and everything related to aviation. That came as a result of a very tragic accident, which included air traffic control and 2 aircraft, which were not able to communicate effectively with one another. I think we are seeing a repeat of that in 2020. What we have is a mosaic of different policies, procedures, government regulations. You have 7-day quarantine, you have 14-day quarantine, you have quarantine at home, quarantine in a hotel, PCR test before arrival, before departure, after arrival, rapid tests, vaccines, 1 vaccine, 2 doses. And you have this entire mosaic which nobody is really able to decipher. And that is really discouraging travel. People like to plan their travel in advance, and they just can't do that with this, hodgepodge of different policies and procedures and government regulations. I think as the stakeholders of travel and tourism, I think we failed miserably last year to bring all of these policies together, to create a global platform where people can understand what is required and expected of them so that they can travel. I think we did very well on the science side. I think we got an A+ for coming out with the vaccine in a record time. And I think we've vaccinated a lot of people, at least in rich countries. And that's great. I think we need to do much better with regards to developing countries where 1 in 500 people are vaccinated, which I think is embarrassing, but that's a different subject. So I think the stakeholders of travel and tourism failed miserably in repeating the success that we've had since the 1950s, where we adopted English, machine-readable passports, visas, different check-in systems all over the world that can speak to one another. We need a repeat of that in 2020. One of the things that we did, and our company, NAS, is the largest airport services company in emerging markets, particularly strong in Africa. What we've done is we developed a system for the Kuwaiti government where we connected labs within Kuwait and labs overseas to the airports using blockchain and biometric verification. Of course, with the full consent of the passenger, we're able to test people in labs that we've audited and confirmed. We know what the standards are, and people can then travel comfortably when they're flying into Kuwait. We've also linked the vaccine database of Kuwait to the airport, and now we're working with international organizations to connect that vaccine database overseas, so people living in Kuwait can travel overseas comfortably using their vaccine passport, if you will. So these are some of the things we've done to kind of resuscitate the travel and tourism industry, which across the world, provides employment for more than 300 million people.
Hassan, we saw after 9/11 an incredible array of security procedures brought into airline travel. Those procedures have stayed with us. Do you anticipate some of the measures we're seeing now in dealing with the pandemic staying as part of the travel process moving forward? Or are you optimistic that perhaps this can be something that only stays in place for the duration of the epidemic?
So I think, Adrian, before 9/11, airport services was built on quality and safety. Those were the 2 things that everybody spoke about. After 9/11, we added a 3rd pillar, which is security. So you said safety, security, and quality, very important. I think now after COVID, we're adding a 4th one, which is health. Traveling across, Africa and other parts of the world, we used to have the yellow fever, the little yellow book for yellow fever, which you would show at the airport, and nobody really knows, is it a forged document, is it valid? They kind of just look at the document. If you have it, they never really pay real attention to it. What I think is going to happen, and I hope happens, is that we have a digital passport, if you will, that is recognized globally, and whereas airport officials can verify that the certificate that you present is authentic. You are the rightful owner of that certificate. You've given your consent to the airport official to have a look at that certificate, and that the certificate is checking the things that the airport official actually wants to check. So is it, whether it's COVID, yellow fever, any other diseases that might arise in the future, it needs to be digital, and it needs to be one that is a platform globally that all of these systems talk to.
Thanks, Hassan. I want to bring the Minister back in, if I may. And Minister, I know your brief doesn't extend to travel, but we heard there from Hassan, and we've also heard from our other panelists about the sheer complexity of the different ways that governments have responded. And obviously the challenge has been enormous for governments. And, you know, one can only, step back and admire the way in which they've risen to the challenge. But on this issue of coordination, is that something you and your colleagues are talking about as perhaps the next step in dealing with the crisis of international coordination, working with companies to try and put in place some of the measures that we're hearing need to be established for us to move forward?
I think, Adrian, we are putting citizen safety first. Given that the virus is mutating across the world, and just when people presume, as Peter in his opening remarks had said, just when people presume that the situation normalizes in one country, it erupts yet again. Governments across the world, I can't speak for them, but I can especially speak for mine. We will prioritize citizens' health security first. We will ensure that we work with governments across the world, but yes, prioritize health security. But I also must here say that the government is working actively with the industry to find solutions, be it economic or for that matter, logistically. But domestically, I think we are currently looking at operations which are completely open. However, I understand the international constraints in which all governments are working. Given till such time that every global citizen is not vaccinated, I think these challenges will continue to erupt, and they will have to be met with solutions which are timely, but solutions that are globally acceptable.
No, thanks for that, Minister. Staying with India, I want to bring in Ajay Singh, who's chair of SpiceJet. Ajay, how have SpiceJet been coping in the current circumstances? We've heard about the difficulties, we've heard about the problems of keeping people moving and of the overwhelming need to secure people's safety. But what's been the impact on a major carrier like yourselves?
Peter, as some of the participants have said, of course, this crisis has been absolutely devastating for the aviation and travel and tourism industry. But as Borge was saying in his opening remarks, it's given an opportunity to airlines like ours to try and pivot to new forms of business and try and find a way in which, as corporations, we can contribute to the larger effort of our nation of keeping people safe. As our Minister Irani was saying in her remarks, I think what SpiceJet has tried to do is to actually assist in the national effort of getting our people back to our country. She spoke of the 9 million people that the government of India got back to their homes. And we are proud to have contributed significantly to that effort. We also realized that what our country would need would be, medicines and medical equipment and, PPE suits and such things which would help the fight with COVID. And SpiceJet quickly pivoted and built a large cargo business, which was basically and initially built to serve our country. And now has become a pretty significant business. I mean, it's grown 6 times from where it started. And the government has actually actively supported this pivot by providing policy directions in such a way that there is suddenly this whole new industry which has been built up in India, where Indians finally and Indian carriers finally are taking India's cargo across India and throughout the world. This was really the preserve of airlines outside India, and this crisis taught us that we could actually do this ourselves. The other pivot for SpiceJet has been its foray into the space of health. We realized that testing, this RT-PCR testing for COVID was extremely expensive in our country. It was around, a test would cost about $25. And we set about to bring that cost down, and we actually brought it down to less than $4. And that made testing much more available for our country. We also built an innovative model where we took these mobile labs. We said, look, in so many ways, Indians find it hard to reach testing centers. And so we took the testing centers to them. And that again is a business which was built out of the necessity of COVID and is doing exceedingly well. We are using the same model now for vaccination. So I think many positives have come out of this problem, and we are proud to contribute, to our government's massive effort at saving its own people.
Ajay, I know you can't speak for the entire industry, but can you give us a sense of how quickly a carrier like you can bounce back and get to back if we move forward in vaccination, if we move forward in protecting people? What is the lag time between someone running a business like yours, getting pilots, getting air crew, getting routes, getting planes back into service to something near the levels that we were seeing before the pandemic? What is the timeline? Is it months? Is it years? Can you give people on the call an idea?
At least I can speak for at least the Indian carriers, and Indians are very innovative people. They move fast. We've seen this happen. Pre-COVID, we were flying about 400,000 passengers every day domestically. And then there was a complete shutdown. We went to zero. In March of 2020, the Prime Minister of India decided that there would be a complete shutdown, which probably saved this country, in that first COVID wave. So we were shut for 2 months, and then we started again in May. And we started bouncing back really quickly. We went from 0 to 300,000 in the space of the next few months. Then, of course, the second COVID wave hit us, and we went back to 40,000 passengers a day. We are now back to 120,000 passengers a day. And I have no doubt that, of course, safety being the highest priority, as soon as we are allowed to fly more, you will find that the Indian carriers will bounce back really, really quickly. In fact, I won't even say that it would take months. It would just take weeks for us to do it. We are all set and ready to go.
Thanks for that. Can I come back, Peter, to ask you, as we look forward to this summer, I just wanted to get a sense, do you feel that the travel changes that we've seen in the last 18 months have structurally changed parts of the industry and also changed permanently some consumer tastes? Or are we simply seeing a period of repression of global demand, of global interest in travel because of the pandemic that will come back to what we thought of as normal before?
Yeah, I think, Adrian, that, and I've said publicly that we believe travel is going to come back more or less like it was. I think, as AJ suggested, it's going to come roaring back. When people can travel, they will travel. And while we believe that there may have been some adoption during the period, people trying vacation rentals, people trying other forms of travel in the US, camping and RVs became quite popular. I'm sure that's true in Europe as well. But we believe it will go back broadly. People will still go to Paris and Rome and Singapore and Shanghai, et cetera. So I think, in general, none of this is structural. And as everybody's alluded to today, I think we expect it will come back essentially how it was, but stronger because of the pent-up demand. And just to refer to a couple of the comments, and Hassan referred to this integration and working together of the foreign governments, or the world's governments, I think it's true. Everybody was focused first on securing the safety of their people. Even in the US, it is clear that that is still our main focus, and the industry is working with government to try to get more involved with other governments to try to align, as Hassan said, around standards of global passports, et cetera. But it is not anywhere yet, really, and there's a long way to go on that. So I think, the shortest distance between us and back to normal is getting the world vaccinated. There's no question. I happen to believe that's probably faster than getting the world's governments to cooperate on a single digital standard, but maybe I'm being pessimistic on that. But I think everything suggests that when they're vaccinated, people return to their habits, the things they love, the places they love to go.
Peter, thank you. I want to draw our conversation to a close, but I just want to give a last word to each of our panelists. If I can start, Ebru, with you, what are you anticipating as we look at this summer, as people in the Northern Hemisphere start making their plans? What are you seeing? Are you seeing, a beginning of a return to something like the situation of 2019?
First of all, I think people are more hopeful, and in Turkey we already have the vaccination identities right now, and it's on digital. And currently we are vaccinating like more than 1 million people. And for this reason, we are very hopeful about tourism, and because we are fully dependent on also tourism. And I was in US, people want to go, people want to travel. So pleasure travelers, we see already in the airports, as I totally agree with Peter, but this is of course dependent on the destinations that are open. I mean, some of the destinations are unfortunately closed, but Turkey is open, so we are seeing more tourists. And people definitely miss to travel on pleasure-wise. However, in business-wise, I don't see that the travel will come back as soon as we expect. Everybody like this, we are so much dependent on Zoom now, and digitally we make meetings. I went to Korea for 1 hour. I traveled from Turkey 11 hours. I don't think I'm going to do that again. Or in the hotels, we used to make big meetings with conferences, gatherings. I don't think these will come back any sooner, but it will be more family travelers, pleasure travelers having holidays by the sea. So basically everybody will travel on the pleasure side, business will wait. So we are changing our strategy in the hotels to more the sports kind of things. Like we are doing like triathlons, tennis, cycling. So all these people would like to come together to jointly to make for sports events. So basically I think everybody missed to travel. So we expect to see a lot of tourists traveling around, but no business yet.
No business. Hassan, is that something you're thinking too, that we'll see a return to people wanting to travel for family reasons, to see loved ones that they haven't been able to connect with for months, and also just to leave the places they've been stuck in for a long time, but that we won't see perhaps the immediate bounce back of business travel?
What I think we're going to see is two things. I think we're going to see a lot of domestic travel, so people traveling within the US or within Europe or within Turkey, for example. And I think with the developed countries or the quote unquote rich countries, people who are vaccinated are comfortable to travel. However, I think with regards to developing countries where vaccine rollout has been much, much slower, I think people are traveling out of necessity or out of apathy. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people have just raised their hands up and said, we can't deal with this anymore. We need to travel, vaccinated or not. We're going on holiday, we're going to travel for business, or we're going to go and travel and see our parents, our kids, our cousins, whatever it is. So I think these are the two different kind of, if you will, pillars that we'll see.
And Ajay, you talked about pivoting to cargo. Do you see business travel coming back in the same way that we've heard from Ebru and from Hassan, in a more limited way, and that you'll be taking a lot more stuff and fewer humans in the near to distant future? Or are you a bit more optimistic about the business perspective?
No, I think I agree with both Hassan and Ebru that business travel would be the slowest to come back. But as you know, India has a very significant domestic market. We have 1.3 billion people, and we all love to travel. And we suddenly discovered India. For so many of us, we didn't know how beautiful our country really was, and we are getting a glimpse of that. And so domestic travel will pick up. Remember that India is also the country which makes the largest number of vaccines in the world. Minister Irani spoke about the 270 million vaccines administered. The government has a really ambitious plan to vaccinate 10 million Indians every day. We vaccinated 8 million people just day before yesterday. So I'm very hopeful that vaccination will pick up pace and Indians will discover India, and we will have a lot of domestic travel within India. And of course, international travel, we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Minister, that seems like a great cue to give you the last word on our discussion today. And we began by talking about some of the issues around equity and the vaccine. We heard from President Sirleaf Johnson about the issue of vaccine nationalism. But on a more positive note, we're also talking about internationalism, about getting people back, moving around this great world of ours, and actually restoring one of the great industries of the global economy, which is travel and tourism. What's your takeaway to panelists and the people watching this afternoon?
Adrian, in India, many of us say "Ummeed pe duniya kaayam hai," which is that the world exists and persists to exist on hope. And as somebody who has traveled well on Ajay Singh's airline with my family, yes, I will support what he says, that we in India are rediscovering our uniqueness in the travel circuit. But we hope to be global travelers yet again. Like I said, prioritizing the security and safety and health of global citizens, ensuring that every global citizen, at least in India, we have ensured that every Indian eligible for the vaccine is vaccinated. Ajay spoke about 8 million Indians. Today, like I said, as we speak, 297 million doses have been given to Indian citizens across our country. We also, since you spoke about equity in building back better, we can today say as Indians proudly so that apart from cash transfers to 200 million Indian women, I was proud to see that 176 million Indian women received collateral-free working capital before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, to help women, especially who are in the SME segment, the government announced a scheme called Swanidhi, which is particularly directed at street vendors, apart from big industry support that the government announced. And happily so, I share today that of the 3 million people who applied for these loans, 41% of the beneficiaries, again, were Indian women. So we are, like I said, committed to building back better, not only for India, but for the world. We in India set an example, as Ajay said, we pivoted on many of our industry segments, be it airlines, be it the manufacturing of PPE, or for that matter, becoming the pharmacy of the world. We stay committed not only for the well-being of India, but also nations across the world.
Minister and all of our panelists, thank you all for joining us this afternoon and for sharing your insights on the global bounce back of what we hope is going to be a return for one of the world's great industries. Thanks everyone for watching, and join you on the next edition of Agenda Dialogues from the World Economic Forum here in Geneva. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye now.